commute. I think it works. Minor adjustment up. There we go. Hello, peoples. Jason here. Holy cow. I've been doing chores palooza today. As such, I have laundry. Yay! And you know what that means? It's time for another stream of Jason. I get a little tired of calling it stream of consciousness because it's just like, that's, you know, everybody says stream of consciousness. I'll call mine stream of Jason because it's a stream of Jason. A little on the nose, I think, though. Holy cow. So I've been living in Spokane for, I don't know how long, a month and a half-ish? Yeah, about a month and a half at this point. It is nice. I like it. I'm still doing the bicycling to work thing, which means, you know, I'm getting at least 30 miles in a week, assuming that I actually go in every day, which is not always the case. I actually have some work from home opportunity with this job, and I've been leveraging that. Probably a touch more than I should, but, you know, it's kind of nice to actually have it, and I can still be fairly productive even when I work from home, especially if work involves watching paloozas of training videos. It becomes a bit monotonous after a while, but, you know, it is actually easier to absorb that kind of stuff at home than it is in the office. Got less distractions in the office for training video kind of stuff, oddly enough, even though when I'm doing regular work, I have more distractions at home, which is, I don't know how that works. It works, that's all I know. How, I have no idea, but it works. And then, as you probably guessed by how long it's been since the last time I've done this, I've got quite a density of laundry piled up here. It's been like 3 weeks since I've done laundry. I think about 3 weeks. Which is not good. I need to do laundry more regularly. I am do laundry regular fail person. Or at least lately I am. I've been a little overly lazy from what I tend to prefer, even for me, which is really saying something because I'm inherently a pretty lazy person. So, you know, we'll see how all that pans out as I acclimate to my new life out here in Spokane. It's Spokane! I'm in Spokane! I sound like an idiot. That's fine. Half of the time I feel that way anyways, so, you know, it's all good. Oh my god. But yeah, the biking to work thing is good. It's at least giving me some degree of exercise. Not like the 10 miles of biking I had back at the tail end of my work in Colorado did. That was that was a lot of cycling. That was a lot of cycling, and man, I really worked up a sweat with that, which was good on some levels. Like the hey, Jason is kind of sort of getting in shape now level. Not good in the holy crap, I'd like to actually have a life level, because that was an hour-long commute. Huh. Anyone who knows me knows I hate commutes. Oh my god, I hate commuting. If I could live another day without ever having to commute again, I'd be very happy. I have a window fan, as you can tell. The window fan is currently set to blow outward because even though it is 81 degrees in my room right now, it is hotter outside still, despite the fact that it is currently 8 o'clock. This is nothing, however, compared to the few days that I spent in Phoenix a while back, where, you know, at this time it would still be over 100 degrees. I just do not. It was over 100 degrees until after 9 o'clock over there, which was, yeah, not so fun. Thankfully, you know, I had a nice, comfortable, for the most part, hotel to just kind of spend all of my time in. That was wonderful. I never left the hotel. I just camped out in my hotel room for as long as I could when I wasn't doing presenty things. And oh boy, did I not do anything aside from just the presentations that I was supposed to do, which I'm very thankful that I got the chance to do. I'm glad I finished that up as I was supposed to. But man, I really didn't want to. I really didn't want to continue things with fundraising after that. I'm really done with fundraising. Despite that everybody's going to be all, oh, rah, rah, fundraising, to me, the entire field of fundraising feels like used car sales. Because, everybody's all like, oh, but think of all of the great causes that we support. And it's like, that's an ends justify the means argument. I will never support that as a, 100% thing. Now, I'm not necessarily of the mind that in every circumstances the means are the ends, but I definitely don't believe that the ends justify the means. You've Everything's really got to be taken for what it is. You can't really generalize any of that kind of stuff. But yeah, no, I just never felt fully comfortable with what I was supporting. And I will say that cybersecurity is not my passion. It's not like I'm all ooh cybersecurity. It's more just like, okay, there's some interesting challenges in this field, and ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm giving companies the ability to help them prioritize what potential cybersecurity threats that they should be working on in order to be most efficient and effective about it. And, to me, that improves the industry and improves the field and basically makes companies more secure and safer. At least that's my opinion on it. Now, as for which companies are really being benefited from this, I mean, it's your usual top bigwigs, the hefty, heavy hitter companies. I'm not going to name names because, hey, I actually work for the private sector now, and I'm like, oh, I can't talk about things, which is mildly annoying, but whatever. I'll at least pretend that I can keep my mouth shut, even though the people who know me know the reality of that quite well. So, anyways, oh boy. So, but it does have some interesting challenges, and one of the big challenges is the lack of good data, which is, it makes me wonder sometimes. There's this real push to be like, we're data driven, because it's like, supposedly this big marketable thing, and it's like, well, is being data driven actually better than running off of expertise? I mean, ideally experts are working off of what data they have, but at the end of the day, a lot of it's really just going to be, well, I learned it in school, or well, I've learned it on the fly, or stuff like that. So I don't know. I mean, it's like it's one of those things that I don't necessarily always think that data driven is the answer, which I'm a data scientist, so that almost seems like it's apocryphal for me to say something like that. But I mean, seriously though, I don't always feel like data driven is the way to go. It's like a buzzword. It's like artificial intelligence, and especially given we've got a sales team as part of the company that I'm in. And, the sales team is basically always looking for, ooh, how can we buzzword our product? And it's just like, come on, guys. I don't care about buzzwords. I'm annoyed that you care about buzzwords. And if our customers care about buzzwords, why the hell are they our customers? They really shouldn't be. But any service needs to make money. And money comes from convincing people who are gullible and have money to give that money to you. So, it's the reality of it, I suppose. I'm not terribly happy with it, but, I do accept and acknowledge that there is a certain reality that exists in the world that, though there is the possibility for it to be mutable, is not necessarily inherently mutable. It's like getting a paradigm shift in physics. Yeah, that's going to happen anytime soon. So, anyways, I'm always very critical of whatever field I'm in. I mean, if I could be a data scientist for, you know, getting back into the public services that I was looking at, like, you know, the human services work that I was doing, except much more involved evaluation work, like real evaluation work, as opposed to the, oh, we're just doing this because we want to make sure our funders keep giving us money evaluation work. Like, I figure maybe another 5 years, I'll start seeing if I can work my way back into similar kinds of work. And I'll be very blatantly asking them about, why are you doing evaluation? What is your organizational goal around evaluation? What does it support? What does it feed into? And if their response is grants, I'm going to be like, I'm not interested. No, I'm really not. I want to be in an organization that does not give a flying fuck about, you know, we're doing evaluation because it gives us money. I want to be in an organization that actually cares about evaluation work and wants to use it to make what they're doing better. Now, one of the theories that I've had, though, as to why evaluation work is so funder-focused, though, is related to some of the challenges that I think exist in the nonprofit, and especially the human services field, in being able to effectively evaluate what's going on. Now, I'm sure some of you have read the book How to Measure Anything, as have I. Well, I actually audiobooked it, but still, same idea. And though I do actually quite like the book, I found it to be very insightful and very, interesting and engaging. The big issue that I have with it is that it takes an overly optimistic perspective on the ability to actually measure anything. My preference, actually, when it comes to the ability to forecast / predict / whatever, I mean, seriously, there's not that much of a difference. It all boils down to, I'm trying to use something to read the future. Anyways, that's another tangent. So, to me, it all really kind of boils down to brain fart. I forgot what I was talking about. Gosh darn it. But anyways, so if I'm in an organization and, if I'm interviewing at a human services, oh, that's right, I was talking about some of the interesting inequalities. So the problems that business solves tend to be very easily quantifiable. They're inherently quantifiable. And there's also been a hell of a lot more work, effort, resources, and whatnot dumped into making them as quantifiable as possible. Because, hey, money. And, investors are very good at throwing money at things that give them more money back. That's the point of investing, So, and one of the things that gives people money back is making very good plans. Making very good plans inherently involves knowing what the heck's going on, what went wrong, what you can do better, and, basically just building self-improvement processes. In much the same way that biology has selective processes for its sort of, inherent improvements, we should probably have our processes as well that provide similar improvement feedback cycles. Now, mind you, human beings inherently will do this, whether we're quantifying how we're doing it or not. I would just say that the quantification of doing it allows us to take it to the next level, but it is always happening inherently. Self-improvement is, I would argue, one of the core fundamental aspects of being a human being, and that we're just inherently doing it all the time. Now, exactly how effective we are at it, that's another question. Because human beings' effectiveness at being able to improve anything, really, is heavily conditional on all of the mitigating factors that exist in our capacity to do so. I.e., one of my goals out here has been to be more physically active. And though technically I have achieved that, I have not achieved it to the level that I would like to, because I am inherently lazy. And, you know, this has to do with character attributes that exist around me as a person. Now, that inherently makes things very challenging because me as a person, I'm not necessarily choosing the most technically optimal path for achieving the results that I would like. However, here's the trick, is that part of my other attributes as a person involve being very creative and, very clever and taking very novel approaches to things. I It's one of the things that I actually really appreciate about my understanding of mathematics. And, I cannot thank 3 Blue 1 Brown enough for this. But, a lot of that is because of the kinds of approaches to mathematics, I've been exposed to, that has helped to give me an understanding of mathematics that goes beyond just throwing equations at things, which I'm starting to realize a lot of people do. And a lot of the time, we human beings, especially out of lower to mid levels of academia, are trained to just throw equations at things. I'm not terribly fond of that approach, as you can probably tell. I like to really understand it, to dig into it and wrap my head around it. And it was one of the interesting things that one of the equations that I learned was exponential smoothing. Now, is exponential smoothing. I still actually, understand it. And the thing is that, this is an equation that has a very niche utility in time series work. And it's oftentimes used as a form of predictive equation. Try to model this increment forward, this increment forward, this increment forward, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, one of the things that I realized about the equation, though, as I was looking at it, as I was trying to understand it, is that it's fundamentally saying something about the nature of the data and how that data changes over time. And this is the thing where most people get caught up with. They look at an equation and they just kind of go blah. And don't get me wrong, I actually do the exact same thing whenever I look at a new equation. It's it's quite an impressive sight, actually, for someone like me who's supposed to be like this math wizard to be stumped by a math equation. It will absolutely happen on a regular basis too. I get thrown something new and my brain doesn't process it very easily. I need to spend some time wrapping it together with things I am familiar with in order for my brain to latch onto it properly. So with exponential smoothing, I spent the time because there was something in the back of my mind that was nagging me saying, this is useful. This is really potentially useful. There's something here I can use. And so I kept with it. And I kept with it. And I kept with it some more and more and more and more. And, I eventually got to the point where I realized something. So if you look at the equation for exponential smoothing, and in order to learn exponential smoothing, I actually recommend looking it up in the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Statistics and Engineering Handbook, which is a amazing resource. Oh my God, you should all, if you're at all interested in you doing anything quantitative, spend some time with this thing. It's amazing. So, anyways, I realized about the equation is that it was basically saying I'm going to take a percentage of the actual data as it is in this time step, and then whatever's remaining of that percentage is going to come through in whatever my previously calculated time step value was. So that what it's effectively doing as it's smoothing is it's basically saying I'm taking this much as wiggle for the new data, and I'm taking this much as, no, stay here. And the balance between those two is what really allows for the exponential smoothing to do what it does. And so the other thing is that exponential smoothing is oftentimes looked at as a forecasting method, which, For the most part, I would say it actually works fairly well with that. But here's the thing: it's not actually a forecasting method. See, it's used as a forecasting method, but I would say it's used in a very naive way as a forecasting method. What I see exponential smoothing is useful for is when you have a process that it generates, so that it has. So let's say you have a set of data, and that data is going to have a mean. It's like your average value, as it were, sort of effectively the center of your data. And you have time series data, it's going to have a mean technically as well. But think about it. If your data goes, it's like, let's say it's like a sine wave. Well, the mean of that is going to be right in the middle of the wave. But at any given point, it'll either be really below it or really above it. So one of the ways to interpret that data is that instead of looking at it as, hey, I have this wave, or say, hey, I have this data that has this mean value of whatever. So say instead, I have this data that has a mean. Ooh, uh-oh, that's breaking. I have this data that has this mean that changes over time. So think about what that means. What that means if the mean is changing. Yeah. Go, Jason. Think about what that's saying about the data. That means you have some process that it's effectively generating an observation by, taking some mean value that we know changes over time and plucking that value out of thin air, and then having some sort of spread around that value. Now think about how that changes the meaning of a mean. Because we're used to thinking of a mean as, well, it's just the midpoint of my data, it's the most likely value if I was just to pick something randomly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Expected mathematical value, all that delightful bullshit. But if you've got a circumstance where that's changing over time, where you have a mean that is different at each time step, then what you've got is a circumstance where you can't necessarily take a single point mean. There's no point estimate for the mean. What you have is you have to have estimates at each time interval for your mean. And effectively, what exponential smoothing is doing is it's saying, all right, so given that I've got this non-static mean value over time, what's my mean likely to be at any given point in time? Based under the assumption that at any observation that you have is that mean plus or minus some variation around that mean. So, like noise, effectively. And, that's, as I see it, that's really what exponential smoothing is that it's trying to get at that mean value, that moving mean. And it's one of two methods. The other one is referred to as a moving average. I don't particularly like moving averages. The big disadvantage of a moving average is that you are required to have however far back your window is worth of data to even start the process, which to me is mildly absurd. The nice thing about exponential smoothing is that you really just need a single seed observation. So, and generally speaking, your best seed observation is going to be your first data point. So you really only need to lose, as it was, just one data point, and you're fine. And, I'm cool with that. I'm totally cool with that. So, anyways, depending on the data, there are other processes that can be going on as well. And one of the other really nice things about exponential smoothing is that it can also extract a trend out of the smooth and give you an estimate on how is that mean changing over time under the assumption that the trend of the mean is something that changes along with the mean itself. So, interesting. But then you start getting into even more complicated things because a lot of the ways of capturing trend with exponential smoothing, at least when you're first learning it, all make the assumption that the trend of the mean is linear at each time step. And the reality is sometimes you have multiplicative trends. So, like you're not changing by a raw value, you're changing by a percentage, which in its own right is quite interesting and actually starts to drift you more into the realm of computational finance, which I think is a fantastically interesting field, with a lot of people who are really obsessed with very traditional approaches, which I could frankly care less about because, you know, I'm me. But then again, you know, exponential smoothing is a pretty old school approach, but I definitely take very modern twists on it. So, but anyways, um, so yeah. Now, one of the other rather fascinating things that I discovered, I don't know if I use the word discovered, that doesn't seem right. One of the other fascinating things that I sort of came across when I was when I was futzing around with different uses and approaches to exponential smoothing was the smoothing coefficient. And that you know, it's like with moving averages, you know, yeah, moving average, you need to identify how big of a window that you want the moving average to be. The bigger your window, the basically the more resistant um, that the moving average is to changes in values. And you kind of have a similar approach with the smoothing coefficient in an exponential smoothing formula. And so the big thing there really kind of boils down to, well, just like it is with moving average, what's the right coefficient to use? And one of the things I was never satisfied with was, well, generally speaking, 0.2 is usually good. You know, I kept poking around with different, you know, stuff and whatnot. And there's two approaches. One of which is sort of the manual. Just pick something around 0.2, you're probably fine. And the other one was no. Use computational approaches to try to identify the optimal you know, coefficients. And I'm just like, I no, no, please. Because the thing is that, at least from my perspective, all of those approaches are some iteration off of gradient descent. There are other clever ways of doing mathematical optimization that don't rely on gradient descent, but those are definitely not the popular ones right now. And we all know everyone's obsessed with the popular stuff. But anyways, also gradient descent is just what I'm more familiar with. But I've also learned how quirky gradient descent is and how problematic it can be. Um, so I've kind of avoided, you could say, really digging into those sort of optimization routines. So I wanted to break it down into a problem that was a little bit more intuitive. And you know, I thought about, well, one of the big advantages of a moving average is that, you know, and also a disadvantage is that it's got this hard window. Now it's like this observation is dependent on only the previous 7 or the previous 20 or the previous 100 observations. And it's just like, well, I got a very defined grasp on what's making up this value. But exponential smoothing does not have that. Exponential smoothing is technically any individual observation is based off of all previous observations to at least some extent, even if it's a negligible extent, which, you know, is, to me, it's really fascinating. But so the real challenge is, well, I don't really have this hard window. I can't necessarily say that, you know, 10 years ago doesn't matter at all, but I can sort of tune it to be like, well, 10 years ago matters negligibly compared to 2 years ago. But, you know, let's say that I'm only trying to predict year by year. And, you know, let's say I've got monthly data. I'm trying to predict year by year. Well, what's the right coefficient to use to predict that? And I actually spent time developing my own algorithm for determining a coefficient, sort of like an optimal coefficient based on, you know, you know, what horizon am I trying to predict across? And it's this really cool equation where I'm basically taking, so I'm taking a sort of an arbitrary, and there always is a little bit of arbitrariness with this. I'm taking a sort of an arbitrary target percentage, and I usually pick 90 or 95%. It doesn't really matter too much which one you pick. It's fine either way. And I'm taking 1 minus that value, and then I'm taking that value to the power of 1 over whatever horizon I'm trying to predict against. And that's the key right there. That 1 over my horizon bit. And then the result of that, I'm taking 1 minus that. And I actually, what this equation is saying, like let's say that I have a 95% target, and I have a, let's say I have a 95% target, and let's say that I have a 7-day horizon. So the equation that I came up with is the mathematical equivalent of saying I want my current smooth value to consist 95% influenced by the past 7 observations. That's how it's working. And, I ran through all the math to sort of, make sure that that was lining up properly and doing what it was supposed to do. And I tested the equation, and it was really cool. The results actually showed that I was getting better predictive forecasts for like a 7-day horizon, for a 7-day forecast horizon with the 7-day horizon on that equation than I was with another horizon, like a 6-day horizon. And it's like one of those things. It's like, well, duh. It's obviously how it would work, but mathematically, it's not. Mathematically, it's one of those pain in the butt things. So, anyways, I have sheets still going in laundry. I'm actually going to change my sheets finally, and I still have a little bit of laundry to put away in the bathroom because change the towels. I have ranted quite nicely about exponential smoothing. I am pleased. All right, folks, I will hopefully see you again next week, assuming I can actually get back onto a somewhat regular schedule for doing my laundry. We'll see if that happens. All right, folks. Peace.